Brittany, Mike. Okay. So forgive me, I'm going to be looking at the screen a lot. All of the text that is there, I'm already displaying why I am inarticulate otherwise. So yeah, forgive me if I look at the screen as we go through. But we'll start off then. So hi, my name is Quin. I'm the producer for art and animation at Sports Interactive. And for those unaware, Sports Interactive is the company behind the Football Manager series. We're sitting just over there if you need to find out more. And which, I've already lost my place, Football Manager series, and it's part of the Sega family of studios. There we go. Football Manager 2024 will be the 20th in the series, which began with Football Manager 2005. But the studio's been running far longer than that, with the first contract for Championship Manager, which was FM's predecessor, being signed in 1991, with our first release coming in 1992. So I know we've got a small audience at the moment, but is anyone here born after 1992? Got a couple of hands? Yeah? Anyone here born after 2004? Thank God. Okay, fine. Well, either way, so we have people who work for the studio at the moment that are younger than the company, as evidenced by two of the hands that I've seen out there. And some that will be in our new graduate intake that are younger than the FM brand as well. So we've been doing this for a long time. But as far as art and animation, and specifically 3D assets and environments are concerned, it's a team that is still in its relative infancy in this industry. So our team, what we do and how we do it is what I'm here to speak about today. The title listed in the schedule is Art, Animation, and Working with Licensed Product, but I'm going to summarize it a bit further by calling it Creativity with Constraints and Why They're a Good Thing. So before I go any further, I'm going to ask a question that I'll answer at the end of the talk, so that way you have to stay, even if it's just to find out if you were right. The question is, according to our latest estimates, FM24 will contain 1,498 licensed kits. How many of them are manufactured by Adidas? So I'll let you ponder on that. I'll give you a clue. There are over 80 manufacturers in the game in total, and Adidas is the most common. So something to think about. I'll answer it at the end of the talk. Jot your answers down now. I'm going to start, though, by telling you a little bit more about my career path and how it led to me becoming a producer at a game studio. But first, this is the last bit of interaction, I promise. Raise your hand if you're here this week to learn about getting into the games industry. Nice. And raise your hand if you're currently in education, so school, work, college. I said work then, I meant school, college, university. There we go. Nice, thank you. And raise your hand if you're considering a career change into the games industry. Good to see. Okay, so every journey into games is valid, and we're not looking for just one kind of person to work in games. So an example, I'll give you my story. So when I was 5 years old, I loved to draw, and I used to draw football kits every day, all day. It was pretty much all I ever drew. When I was a teenager, I used to play football. I was also qualified as a referee and coach, spending my weekends and holidays working with the Community Sports Trust at Brentford FC. Football was more of a hobby, though, even. So by the time I was 16, I wanted to be an architect, largely because I was good at art and photography, but also maths and physics. So I took those 4 subjects at A-level, and I applied to do architecture at university, where I was told at the interview of my top choice university, have you considered a gap year? So I decided I wanted to be an animator instead and not an architect. I took the year out, I retook some exams, and applied to Bournemouth University to do a BA in computer visualization and animation. After graduating, all my friends went to work in film and television. I responded to an internship opportunity at an engineering consultancy and became a visualization specialist, where I got to create images and videos of upcoming construction projects. It isn't written there, but HS2 was one of them, and it's a bit like, yeah, sore subject. It was basically the best bits of architecture and animation all rolled into one, which was a result. After a couple of years, though, I decided to travel and take a proper gap year. I asked for a sabbatical from the engineering company, was told no, so I quit. And as part of my travels, I worked at an American summer camp where I learned so much more about people management, looking after 8 to 16-year-olds than any dedicated management seminar can teach you. I was able to get my old job back when I returned to the UK. They allowed me to call it a sabbatical after that. But after feeling unfulfilled after the experience of a lifetime, I quit again a couple of years later to return to the summer camp, this time as entertainment director. which I followed up with a working holiday for 2 years in Canada. This is all going somewhere, I promise. In Canada, I worked on a ski hill, lived in the mountains, and cleaned toilets to pay my way. It was humbling and taught me never to be too proud, and that contentment in life, as well as career, comes from many factors. In my first summer of the working holiday, I successfully applied for a short-term contract at EA to work on FIFA 17. My backgrounds in football and animation meant I was a perfect candidate for a seasonal licensing role, where I collected reference for all the kits in the game. So 5-year-old me was loving it. Upon returning to the UK, I truly kicked my career ladder from beneath me. I swallowed my pride. Did I write this? Yes. Swallowed my pride, got a minimum wage job at a hostel, and looked for other opportunities. The following summer, EA got in touch about a job at their UK office. So a similar short-term contract to work in license reference collection. It had no job security, but I bet on myself and I took it. 3 weeks before the contract was due to end, my dad, who was working at Watford FC at the time, said he was speaking to colleagues of mine, but they had no idea who I was. This turns out was because Watford had a partnership with Sports Interactive and not EA, and so he had no idea there was difference between the two games. His mistake, though, led to them knowing that I was due to finish at EA soon, and they asked for a CV. SI didn't have a dedicated licensing role at the time, so my knowledge and experience would be useful for their upcoming approvals process. I turned an initial 6-month contract into a full-time job, and I also began to contribute to the creation of licensed assets as well as their approval, meaning at 32 years old, I was drawing football kits all day, every day. But this time it was my job. I've been at SI 5 years now, and as of February this year, I moved from licensing producer to producer for the art and animation team, in large part due to the connections forged between the two disciplines and knowing how important the constraints of licensing are to the overall visual output. So all this is to say, if anyone was thinking of asking me how to get a job in production at a games company specifically, I have absolutely no idea. If I had to give any advice, though, it would be that knowing exactly what you want to do or what you want to be isn't necessary for your entire future. Whatever you're doing right now that you enjoy and that you know that you're good at, do it to the best of your ability. Never see any career movement as a failure, up, down, or sideways, and be open to consider any opportunity, no matter how left field it may feel at the time. That's more than enough about me personally, though, so on to the real reason I'm here. I'll start with a little more detail into the art and animation team at Sports Interactive, and then show you some more about why creativity with constraints is a good thing for our products. So SI's art and animation team is divided into 6 main disciplines. We've got animation, character, environment, technical art, 2D art, and licensing. Animation covers anything that moves in the game, essentially, which largely centers around players on the pitch and animations your manager and for your staff and your manager on the touchline. We partner with our sister studio, Creative Assembly, for motion capture, which is then cleaned up in-house for use in our games. This team is also responsible for camera and prop animation, which is mainly visible during our cutscenes. Our character artists concentrate on human form and are responsible for the player and manager models in the game, as well as ensuring that our animation team is able to apply their work to said models. The environment team is responsible for all locations you visit during a save in FM, from the boardroom and changing room spaces through to the stadiums each match is contested in. Our technical artists make sure all other artists have the tools required to successfully do their jobs. They also actively input in animation, character, and environment work, often prototyping techniques which become the standards we work towards across the team. They're also the bridge to SI's team of graphical engineers that focus on the implementation of assets created by artists. 2D art encompasses everything from concepting and storyboarding through to icon and asset creation, and licensing, in reference to the art team, focuses on the assets we create in collaboration with real-world entities, such as clubs and competitions, to increase our levels of authenticity in the game. We're a relatively small team, fewer than 20 people in total, so understanding where and how we can be most creative is really important for scoping requirements for each release and prioritizing which areas need to be in the game and which, as opposed to things we simply want to be there. This is more of a project management constraint and speaks more to project management than creativity, really. Or you may have seen the project management triangle before, where quality is derived from a balance of cost, time, and scope. For us, time is fixed. We release annually, so extending this really isn't an option for us. Therefore, increases in scope will also increase cost, as we'll either need more people to execute the work or rely on outsourcing. If cost is also limited, then the scope is the most important thing for us to decide. If we get this wrong, we'll either incur additional costs, delay the release of the game, or end up with things missing from the final product. Speaking more about creativity than production, though, the main thing we're seeking as a team is creative focus, not creative freedom. The YouTuber Campbell Walker, aka Streethless, I don't know if anyone watches any of their stuff, has a great video about this, which I massively recommend to anyone feeling that they're in a creative rut or suffering from creative angst in any way. It details a little bit about the history of Duke Nukem, actually, but the most relatable part of the video for me was an example about being given two pieces of paper. One is completely blank, and the other has an instruction on it to draw a picture of a dog bouncing on a beach ball. The second is the best to get you out of a state of creative angst, because immediately you're freed from infinite choice, and you're focused on being creative within a set of parameters. For us, the dog on a beach ball is the world of football, but more specifically, it's the areas of this world that we're able to actively control. So our database is where most of this direction comes from. It dictates things like our environments, so stadiums and facilities, conditions, seasons, temperature, weather, time of day, match days, so things like crowds, kits, flags, officials, and decorations, and in the match itself, so players, substitutes, animations, and dynamic weather. There are close to 7,000 competitions containing almost 85,000 clubs with around 1.1 million people associated with them in the FM database. It's therefore impossible for us to consider creating bespoke assets for each of these environments and characters on a club-by-club basis. Instead, we champion a philosophy of uniqueness instead of bespokeness. So what does this mean day to day? For environments, we're able to use parameters like where a stadium is. So is it in a city or a more rural area? Rural area, try saying that 3 times quickly. All right, is the stadium enclosed or does it have missing stands? Are areas of the stadium seated or standing for spectators? And is there a difference between stadium capacity or used capacity? So this is often seen in the MLS in America, where soccer clubs play at NFL stadiums and therefore cover empty seating to give the illusion that the arena is more full. Our database also contains information about the latitude and longitude of each stadium. So in theory, we could simulate an accurate location of the sun in the sky for the appropriate time of day at any given ground. But does that mean we should? In terms of assets, instead of creating variations for each of these parameters, we instead look to break environments, characters, and assets down into the smallest numbers possible, and then utilize the power of combinations to find uniqueness across the game. As far as our match engine is concerned, stadiums are made up of 8 sections, each of which can contain different stadium pieces relative to the approximate values for capacity, materials, and condition. So in theory, if we were to create just a single version of each in a list of 1, 2, and 3 tier stands, as well as a no stand option, for each of the 8 locations around the stadium, there would be over 65,000 combinations of those stands. Increasing our library to 3 versions of each of the 1, 2, 3 tier and no stand options, there would then be almost 430 million combinations, more than enough to cover the 85,000 clubs in the game, all with the creation of an achievable and finite number of assets. Obviously, the real number would be actually less than this, as there's no chance we'd have situations like 3-tiered corners and no stands in between. But the power of this method remains. If we also include data-driven items like club colors and supporter flags, then we're able to confidently say that every team will have a unique playing environment, albeit familiar in some cases. And in this example, knowledge that corners and end stands can be duplicates mean that 48 stand models would be required to generate this solution. I mentioned latitude and longitude being taken into account for things like daytime lighting earlier. So this was actually used up until FM23, but we decided to move away from it because while it was accurate relative to itself, it provided objectively poor results compared to having more creative control of the daytime lighting. So for FM24, lighting improvements are in part as a result of us defining 20 presets that match day data can be assigned to. So these include 2 main categories, cloudy and clear, and then 2 main seasons, winter and summer, and then 5 times of day, so sunrise, morning, midday, afternoon, and sunset. We approach characters in a similar way too. Every character in the game is given one of 11 ethnic origins, as well as a choice from a range of skin tone options, one of 5 height and weight settings, and a selection of hairstyles. Between them, we're able to provide a fair approximation of every player in the game. After identifying the core environments and characters that appear in football, the things which separate each club from one another in the real world is their identities. For most, it's as simple as a club's colours, seen everywhere, including environments, on fans, and they usually inspire the main kit components too. Most clubs wear either red, blue, white, black, yellow, green, orange, purple, or some combination of the above. So that's 8 colours. 8 colours doesn't really feel like enough to separate 85,000 clubs, but 2 colours can separate whole cities. Wearing red or blue in Liverpool, blue or green in Glasgow, or white or red in North London is enough to know exactly where your allegiances lie. With such a limited colour palette, every club requires at least 2 variations of playing kit, usually described as home and away. This prevents 2 teams wearing the same colours on match days. It also provides a great merchandising opportunity for clubs and manufacturers, which is why most clubs these days somehow manage to make their away kits not quite different enough. Wimbledon here opting for a blue home kit and a navy blue away kit, and then so therefore require a 3rd kit. For the games that they're used for games that neither home or away are suitable. Although this is a rabbit hole you don't really want to get me to go down. We have 700 licensed clubs in the game, which I'll get into in a minute, which means that 84,000 clubs still require unique kit combinations. We use generic assets to provide unique kits and logos to each club. For kits, we use one of 56 shirt varieties, 10 shorts options, and 15 sets of socks. As you can see, these are colored in red, green, or blue in our default assets. Our database is then able to choose any combination of the designs and assign colors to each of the 3 areas. These examples show some kits created using this method. You'll also notice generic logos seen there too. Clubs are assigned one of 13 logo designs that uses the same method of coloring sections of the asset based on database information. So we've defined ways of making sure your club, characters, and environments will look unique once you start a new save. Competitions provide us with another level of detail that offers a unique experience depending on which competition you're playing in. Your club will look mostly the same throughout a season when playing at home, so how do competitions find ways to differentiate themselves from one another? Colors, usually, same as kits, but also with logos, broadcast graphics, and matchday props. With only around 60 competitions out of 7,000 licensed, we use generic assets to provide a variety in this area too, including a choice of 2 logos, 11 trophies, and utilizing competition text and colors on generic props to make each unique across the game. In theory, we could do this without any licenses, and the subliminal suggestion of colors, props, and generic assets would be enough to provide variety. It would provide enough variety even to have a level of authenticity. That would be good, but we want the game to be great. To do that, we've worked over a number of years with an increasing number of licenses to provide an authentic experience to our users. We achieve this via the creation and implementation of licensed kits, logos, trophies, match balls, ad hoardings, player headshots, broadcast graphics, and most recently with props and music too. I'll use the EFL, English Football League, as an example for this, as they're currently the biggest license that we have in terms of number of assets. So the EFL is the main entity. It oversees the league, 3 league competitions, 2 cup competitions, and 72 clubs. Each competition has unique branding and therefore unique assets such as logos, match balls, trophies, ad hoardings, and sleeve patches. On top of this, each competition has a color scheme that makes it uniquely identifiable, even if licensed assets aren't present. Bespoke broadcast graphics are also used across their competitions, which are virtually identical outside of the use of competition branding in select areas. Each match is unique from one another, though, due to the use of kit colors and club logos across each graphic. So you'll see that they've got the blue for Leicester, white for Leeds, green in the top corner for the Carabao Cup as well. So rather than creating each possible combination in advance, we're able to utilize the database to power the placement of assets and the coloring of the areas of the graphics. For each of the 72 EFL clubs, in fact, for each of the 700 clubs we have in the game, we also implement logos, kits, and player headshots, all seen here on a typical club overview screen. Most assets, when provided, are implemented with minimal intervention. So logos, trophy, images, headshots, etc., all come into us as PNG files. They can pretty much go straight into the game as is. For the creation of kits and match balls, on the other hand, they require a reference for us to then recreate the assets as textures for our existing props. So here's an example of a kit texture and its 3D asset in the game, as well as a match ball texture and its 3D asset in the game. We therefore need to find ways to create uniqueness, not bespokeness, in these assets too. Usually, manufacturers help with this. There are a lot of complaints each year from football fans surrounding the idea that manufacturers are lazy and that they provide the same kits to multiple clubs. This is not a conspiracy, it's completely true. And as a fan of football kits, I'm torn as to how I feel about it. From a fan perspective, I like seeing bespoke designs for each club, but professionally, seeing the same template used across multiple clubs means that we can use the same components across multiple assets. Some examples from FM20 a few years back proved this point brilliantly. So Puma were by far and away the laziest manufacturer that year, going so far as to not only give the same style, but also the same color kits to these 7 clubs. White was also a favorite of theirs in their second most popular style. 3 of these 6 even have the same sponsor. So in fact, color variations of this style were often given to the same club, meaning that this template and sponsor combination appeared 9 times in FM20. It's not just kits though. So these Puma match balls cover the EFL Championship, EFL League 1, EFL League 2, Carabao Cup, EFL Trophy, SPFL Premiership, SPFL Championship, SPFL League 1, SPFL League 2, Scottish Cup, Viaplay Cup, and the SPFL Trust Trophy. So 12 competitions covered by virtually identical assets, which we see as an absolute win. There wasn't time for me to put my head on the Hulk for the next slide. That was what it was going to be. To make sure we're not accidentally duplicating any templates when creating similar assets with multiple artists, we use component files to retain popular patterns, designs, and things like collar styles and sleeve cuffs, etc. These are also provided to outsourcers with the idea that all assets will be created the SI way, meaning you shouldn't be able to distinguish which artist worked on each asset. This also helps reinforce our own internal brand. As with anything related to licensing, though, for every rule, there is at least one exception. And I've spoken at great length now about the uniqueness over bespokeness and its virtues. However, for FM23, we onboarded our biggest license ever in terms of global profile when we licensed the UEFA club competitions for the very first time. So this was hugely exciting for us, but without any clubs directly associated with the licensor, our options for how to maximize the value of the license were limited within our usual processes. Therefore, we created brand new features for the game specifically to provide a more bespoke experience for these most special of competitions. For each of the 4 main UEFA club competitions, we included the standard logos, match balls, trophies, and broadcast graphics. However, we also created bespoke cup draw experiences alongside the wider cup draws feature that year, surrendering more of our UI and brand identity over to a licensor than we'd ever done before. We also created bespoke props and cutscenes of the Champions League, Europa Conference League, and Super Cup to ensure that the arrival of these competitions was seen as a distinct achievement for every player that reached them. These are currently the only licensed 3D trophies we have in the game, for example, and we also had to ensure that bespoke requirements for these competitions were adhered to, including dynamic sleeve patches that would change depending on what competition you were playing in, as well as an alternate default camera angle. Where am I? There we go. Which made sure to highlight the bespoke perimeter arrangements UEFA competitions have. The final touch was the inclusion of the music for each of these competitions in cutscenes. Of all our licenses, these competitions are the only ones in which the audio experience is as recognizable, if not more so, than many of the assets themselves. Anecdotally, until we got that music on board, we had someone just sing the Champions League theme tune and put that into the game. And so that was what we all heard every time we reached one of those screens until the music finally arrived. A mixed reaction once it finally entered the game. This was a big achievement for us, but not one I wish to replicate across all our licenses. By reserving something like this to a select few competitions, it adds to how special they feel to users once they reach them. So that's been a little about me, the studio, the work we do, and how we seek to use creative focus to provide uniqueness in our games, while ensuring that our scope of work is achievable within the more fixed parameters of time and cost that come with our annual release. It's the end of the presentation, which means it's time for you to find out the answer to the question I posed at the beginning of the session, which was how many of the 1,498 kits are expected to be manufactured by Adidas in FM24. Any guesses? Anyone prepared to shout out? 600, anyone got another offer? 400, we've got 600, 400. Another 400. 34, was that? 54. 500, there we go. Don't make me, I'm not a professional lip reader, clearly, and won't ever be. All right, so the actual answer is 218. So a little bit less than you think, but considering we have 80 manufacturers across the game, that's a significant chunk where 1 in 7 is going to be Adidas. In fact, the top 5 manufacturers in the game make up 50% of our kit assets. The top 10 make up over 75% of our kit assets. So there's a lot of manufacturers that are in for one club specifically, and that's it. So, yeah. But we enjoy a good Adidas template, basically, when we see one come in. All right. That's my final question to you answered. So if you have any questions for me, now's the time. And thanks so much for listening. Ooh, and breathe. Are there any questions? Am I going to get away with it?
Anybody think of it as an amazing offer? Yes, brilliant. Someone to break the ice. Maybe the first question.
Hi, I was just wondering, since you changed from using the specific daytime lighting based on the latitude and longitude of the stadiums to the creative lighting, what has that allowed you to do in terms of kind of power, play space, and kind of why have you gone for that more creative approach?
So it was to give the artists more control as a fundamental reason. We've actually got the person who did a lot of the lighting changes in front of you, so if you want to come over and have a chat later, Laura will be able to be more specific. But so it was knowing that with that more creative control, we were able to be a bit more bespoke about sunlight placement. It's sort of the difference between, if I reference my time at the engineering company, I was an engineering visualization specialist, as opposed to an architectural visualization specialist. And the difference being that the architects do things how we want things to look, and the engineers have to tell you how it will look. So it's similar to that, knowing that realistically, we're not going to have new users look at the game each year and go, well, that's not where the sun rises in my stadium. We've already got quite generic assets in those environments because we don't have licenses for each stadium. So there's not even really a sense of where north is in those grounds either. So if anyone's getting to that level of granular detail, it's not something really we needed to worry about. So bringing that back and going, we still use latitude and longitude, but what it does is it lands on one of those 20 distinct settings instead. So we can say, okay, so it is an afternoon in England, means it will still be daylight, we'll use this particular setting, sunlight will look like this, general colors will be able to look like that. And it's given us an extra level of depth by being able to be, a little bit more bespoke, but using combinations as our factors instead. So it was mainly an artist decision more than an accuracy one, but one that we feel that users will appreciate a better looking game over a more accurate one relative to itself, if that relative to itself is objectively worse. So that was our reasons for doing it.
I was going to say, so with that, I mean, you were also talking about the stadiums that have different tiers and how it generates both, obviously, with the walls and the corners. Was there a consideration of kind of shadows and how that impacted the stadium's architecture with the different kind of templates you have in terms of the colours of the stadium and the seats?
Yeah, in fact, that was also one of the reasons why it even came up as a conversation, because having that Latin longitude, okay, it's 3 o'clock kickoff in the afternoon somewhere, but the sun is below the stand height on a bigger stadium. So yes, okay, the outside scene is nice and bright, clear sunny day, but the whole ground was then in shadow. So you don't really get that summertime feeling in that stadium as a result, especially when a lot of our cameras are going to be focused just on the match and not the outside scene. So without us having flyover cameras or cutscenes to give you that context at the beginning of a game, you're just seeing something that, because it's all in shadow as well, it's very flat as a result. So actually going, okay, realistically, winter's evening, but it's a clear day, is going to have a sun that's probably not high enough to get above the stand. Let's actually do that so that you can see a shadow on the pitch, so that there is a feeling then with colours and otherwise that it looks like a bright winter's day, and you're enough to know bright winter's day.
That's brilliant. Anyone else? Yes.
Hi, so I was reading recently about all managers introducing a women's game. So I'm just really interested to see how that's going to impact your processes, because that's doubling up even more work, even more complex, even more kit. So how has that impacted your timeline, considering you're not released annually, to add that extra workload, and how does that impact your processes?
So, I mean, we announced our intention to do women's football after we'd already been working on it for a bit, and that was a number of years ago. So that is where we won't say this needs to be in for next year or it's an annual release. We're getting it ready so that it will be able to be in line with our men's game and then updated in the same way as we have with the men's game there as well. And for something that an easy potential win there, as foolishly, would be, oh, well, we've already got animations of people running around, so we can just put the women's model on that, right? No. So that's one area where we go, no, this is something we need to make sure we have a differentiation for as well. And when we've got however many years of build-up of motion capture that we've had for the men's game, we've had to now go back and do all of that again in one big chunk for women's football. So we've been doing motion capture and getting information from relative matches. Also got to build up our research as well. So that is an area where we won't say, where can we make shortcuts or how can we half this to be one game. There will be areas where we're literally saying we need to double our resources, because appreciating that while it's all football, they are still very different sports in a lot of ways. We also have, with the kits as well, there's been consideration to try and make sure a lot of women's teams have the same kit as the men's one, but it's not exactly the same model. So is there a way of making our UVs work that we can then create one kit and it works for both? And then as we're having those discussions, we had like Arsenal away kit this year released as a separate asset. And again, speaking about the manufacturers seeing a merchandising opportunity, as women's football increases in popularity, we're going to see completely different kits for the men's and women's teams anyway. So any chance of us trying to find out ways of doubling up is probably futile, because there will be a separate version of the women's kits there. It won't just be a change in sponsor or something. So yeah, that is an area where we're definitely constantly considering there needs to be an extra person for this, or there needs to be a doubling of that team for that as well. No problem. Have we lost the owner of the microphone? If there is another question, it can be passed on. Whilst it's moving, though, on the topic of the environments as well, this is going to be unhelpful because I can't remember the video I saw. But there is I think it might have been a Johnny Harris video or something, but it was about postcards. And it was this person that, if you search on YouTube, like people collecting postcards, there is like someone who collected all these postcards around the world and then realized that they're seeing the same sky in every single one. And the reason was, it was actually so that the publisher of those postcards could say, like when fake towns on maps, well, some people will put that in on map companies, they'll put a fake town in so that they can tell if someone's copied their design. This person, this publisher of the postcards, was using the same sky, same set of clouds, wherever these images were in the world, to know that if they ever saw that image on another publisher's postcards, they know they've stolen the image. But from a user perspective, from people buying those postcards level, unless you're going to collect thousands of postcards, you wouldn't necessarily have noticed it. And no one noticed blue sky with a couple of clouds here. We know where in the world this is. And so it's that theory as well of going, on a user level, who's actually going to tell, oh, that's not what summertime looks in Spain compared to summertime in England. Like, summertime is summertime or a sunny condition, and the rest of it is like, we can then increase our ability to do other things better instead and increase our visual output as a result. So I recommend looking into it. It's a proper nerdy YouTube hole. The algorithm's going to get messed up afterwards, but it was really interesting to see. I'm going to take that as end of questions, though, if there is nothing else. Thanks, everyone. Cheers.